Good morning, crafty viewers, and thank you for joining me for the finale of the Gypsy Satchel. As you continue to work on your pieces, please share your pictures to the Mandala Unplugged group on Facebook. We all want to see your works in progress and, of course, the finished satchel. So let's get started and work on those finishing touches. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get some of the spiral color sort of included into the bag in the upper part, since most of the spirals are down at the bottom. So we're going to do just a little kind of a, it's not really any, I don't know if there's even really a name for it. It's just sort of a variation of a fly stitch. Bury your thread and then just come out towards the top, sort of in between all of the stems, and about half of an inch in parallel over, insert your needle, and then just come out like you're going to do a fly stitch. Capture that U shape by stitching just directly over that thread, and then again come up about half of an inch and parallel over. And then we'll make another one. You're going to insert the needle at the base of where you were coming out of, sort of at that locking stitch. Let's change direction this time. So we're going to go over it, and then go into the base. Mine's really hard to see because it's almost the same color. But if you're using a contrasting spiral, this color is great. This little bit of stitching what we're doing right now is great to incorporate that color back up in. And then just work your way, working any direction you want to, any side of that stitch that you want that works. And continue down until you can't go down anymore, until you hit some of these flowers. Okay, so we're locking that stitch in. We'll go this way this time. Insert it into the base, down. Always working over your thread when you're trying to capture that little V. Go keep going in this direction. Lock it in. Go back down into where you were coming out of. And then once you hit sort of where you can't go anymore, just make this a stem and weave this in as always. And then clip it. And just work those sort of in between and up through. You can work in some of these spaces down here as well. And what this also does is it sort of tightens up some of these loose stitches. Once you have all your background stitching done with yarn F, we're going to take thread D, which is the DMC floss. Take 3 strands of that, and on each leaf, just to give it a little bit more definition, we're going to whip stitch along the vein, that center vein that we made when we crocheted. So just starting at the top in a spiral motion, whip stitch along each stitch in the vein. And if you feel like you want your leaf to have more definition, you can certainly whip stitch along the outer stitches as well. Give it a shot and see if you like it. And if not, you can always take it out. It's just about playing around and seeing what you want to do with the leftover threads and beads and things that you have. Just play. Fill it up. Obviously, in this satchel, more is more. Okay, then when we reach end, that last little stem, just tuck it in and leave it. All right, get out your tassel bag and all your other extra beads that you have left over from your other bags, and we are going to work on the tassel next. Okay, the tassel. This is really fun. The first thing we're going to do is make these little spider legs. We've already got this base from when we did our little handles, so we've got that. In your tassel bag in your kit, I put 2 different kind of bugles, some long ones and some short ones. Whatever you have the fewer of, do them as the middle bugle, as I've done here. And we're going to put a shorter bugle on either side, or there's a short bugle and 2 long ones, however you want to do it. In between the bugles, just make sure you put some little seed beads. That way that'll cover that thread that's in between the 2 bugles. And those you can get from your bag A, your leftover beads from that, and really any leftover beads that you have or that's in your kit. You also will have an ending bead, which is either a teardrop or a size 6 seed bead. And what you want to do here is just sort of lay out what you think might look good in a pattern. We'll get your end bead and your bugles, right? And then just, kind of fill in the smaller beads and what you think you might want it to look like. It might take you a couple times to figure it out. Sometimes it looks better laying out than it does actually strung up. So, whatever you want to do here is up to you, your choice. We're going to make 6 of them. Here I've got the 2 longer and the shorter in the middle, and a few little tiny 11 beads, and I did all of them the same, all 6 of them the exact same. So as far as threading, the challenge is always to find a needle small enough to go through the beads, but big enough to hold the thread that you're using. Now we could do this whole thing on beading thread, and that's fine, but over time, that's a slippery thread and I find it weakens. So what I really wanted to do was make these, keep them really stable, and make them on the size 8 pearl cotton, which is your thread I in your kit. I can't get this through the needle that is going to be small enough to get through some of these bugles. What I did was I took a piece of polyester, really strong polyester thread, threaded my tiny needle, and then just made an overhand knot in it. And that way the beads can travel down through this needle, over this tiny little knot, and then over this size 8 pearl cotton. And I just find that this thread will hold those beads in place, and over time and with wear, you'll have a lot more success keeping those beads locked down and not spreading apart. So that's how I did that. The first thing you want to do is thread on the bead that you're going to have as your end bead. And then thread on the rest of them. So here on either side of this end bead, I've got 2 little size 11 seed beads, a crystal size 6 seed bead, another 11, and then the bugles that I just talked about. So thread all of those on just one side of this bead. So I'm going to start by threading on my first bead. And of course, this goes so much faster once you know what order you're going to do, and once you have one, then you just copy it. Okay, a little crystal size 6 seed bead. Okay, so then once you have all of the beads strung on the first thread, take the other end, little short tail, and crease that fold. Just run your fingernail over it so it holds better. I'm going to pick up one more little size 11 seed bead, as I want that on the other side of this teardrop. So I'm not going to go through that bead again. I'm going to go through the second bead, the crystal. Let's see if I can get this closer. What you want to be careful of is not piercing that thread that's already going through it. So just go through a couple beads at a time. Okay, so here I've gone through the crystal and the size 6 bead. And the 11. Just try to pull down on the thread to keep that out of the way. And then the bugle. The holes of bugles are really tiny, so it's just a little tricky. If you can kind of envision scraping the end of the needle into the bead, you might be okay. Okay, and then to check to make sure that you didn't pierce your other thread, just hang on to just that end bead, and if your thread is pulling through, you're good. You're good to go to keep going. So if you need to, rethread your size 8 pearl cotton, and then continue up the bead thread. And then again, just every once in a while, push everything down and make sure that your thread can pull, which it can still. And this is a slick thing to know if you ever need to put tiny little beads on yarn or thread or something. This little extra thread trick is a good trick. Okay, through those two. And then through the last bugle. And then the last two, or one, or whatever you have at the top here. Okay, once you have all of your beads on, just make sure everything is lining up. You pull on that last bead and then just push all the beads down towards it so that there's no space in between. Take your tails and just tie one overhand knot real tight. And then you've got your 6 little spider legs, and those go on the outside of the tassel. The rest of your thread and wind it around your hand, your 4 fingers, about 15 times. And that'll give you 30 little pieces of thread, right? So 1, 2, 3, 14, 15. Clip it. Clip about I suppose a 6, 8-inch piece. Pop it through the loop, take it off your hand, and then tie it in a really nice tight double knot. And then just take your scissor and clip that. And then the same thing with the main yarn, whatever main yarn you have left, or you could certainly use something different if you've run out. I just chose to use the same yarn, but you can do a contrasting color tassel as well. Whatever you like. Okay, so and then this do 12 times. 1, 2, 3, 12. Same thing, clip it. 6/8" piece of the yarn through the loop and tie a nice big knot. That was pretty tricky, wasn't it? And then clip the base. Okay, and so what we're gonna do is we're gonna get all of this combined together, but before we do that, I'm gonna throw some beads on this, and we wanna be able to see them, so we're gonna make this guy a little bit shorter. Now, my hands are small, so your tassel might measure smaller or bigger than mine, doesn't really matter. Well, what I did is I cut about almost an inch off of this, so at about 2¼ is what my big yarn tassel will measure. So I'm just gonna clip all this and then put it in our bonus threads pile, or clippings. Okay, so that measures 2¼ and then for this little guy, what we're gonna do is just take all the extra beads that came in your tassel kit and just put some beads on, just completely random, and that we can use. We're going to string them right onto each thread so we can thread these. These are bigger beads. Of course, you can use that little extra thread method if you need to. Okay, and so maybe I'll put on a big bead and then a crystal. And then this leaf. So I slide the other two all the way up and then tie a knot right here. And I do put, a lot of times, just put a little dab of super glue on that knot. Try to tie the knot as close to the end as you can possibly get it, because we want these to dangle. We want them to be a little bit longer. We want to see them. Right, so tie the knot, pull on it really tight, put a dab of super glue if you want to, and then these beads will slide down and hide that knot, and then you can clip the end here. I put just an assortment of beads. You can use beads from your beaded bud or your other bags of beads. You can even try to do that old twisted knot trick. If your bead will easily slide down, keep tying knots until it won't. Yep, that one will slip, so I'm gonna have to do that a couple times. There's a couple decent sized knots in there. One of the things you want to be careful of is, you've got this tassel. Keep your ties out of the way. You don't want to tie beads on those. And every yarn, every piece of thread on this side corresponds to one on this side. So the best thing to do is, when you're tying your beads on, once you do one side, pull it to see what the other end is. Watch this side to make sure. You can see this one's about to pull out. Make sure you tie a bead on its corresponding thread. That way, if this ever pulls out, this will stop it. So if you did 8 sets, you'd have about half of the tassel beaded, which is fine. You could do them all if you want to, but do 8 and then pick it up and kind of hang it and make sure that it's not going to get so bulky. And go ahead and put beads. You can make some of the threads a little shorter so that all the beads aren't gathered in all in the same place. And then, of course, these will pull. You can adjust those as always. So once you get all the beads on there that you want, take the rest of the strands and just tie those little end knots. And if you didn't see this before, you basically just put it around your finger, twist the yarns and then pull the knot down. And clip it. Okay, so there's your inner tassel. Up through the center of your big yarn tassel. And then just to secure it, you can tie a knot between a big one and a little one. And then these 4 ends go up through your beaded wrap that you did previously. Just make sure you weave the ends in of those. And you can do these, you don't have to do them all at once. And then that wrap should cover the knot. Just push it down real tight. And then you've got your tassel. I'm using this cotton yarn that we did for the main part of the bag. This yarn is great because it splits apart, just like a floss. And when you split them apart, these ends get kind of wavy. So this is one of those, and you don't have to do this. I just kind of like the look of it. But this is one of those Netflix binge-worthy activities, right? So once you get all those done, if you want to, take one of the ends of your spider leg and just run it between the two bottom beads. And then tie a knot and then run the ends of these up the tube. So by the time you're done, you'll have them spread, 6 of them, or however many you did, evenly around the wrap, and everything will be sticking out of the top of this wrap, and then we're going to put it inside the bag. And once you get all of your little beads on and your knots tied on the inside and your threads split apart, if that's what you chose to do, you'll have your little tassel. So this is going to go up through this bottom hole here, and the best thing to do is take a crochet hook inside the bag and just pull all the fibers through. Any little stragglers, you can get your crochet hook and pull those through as well. Okay, and then hold on to your tassel and turn your bag inside out. We're going to tie that and knot that off inside there really good, and then we're going to work on the lining. Wow, our bag is messy on the inside, isn't it? We are going to cover all that up, so not to worry. And just take these individual threads. Really tight knot. And then just weave them up through the bag. And then, of course, some of the smaller ones you can knot. Take 2 of them. Pick up a piece of the bag. Take 2 more. Knot it really tight. And then weave all the knotted ones up. You don't have to do each one individually. And then take out all your excess fabrics that you have and cut them into small pieces like this. You know, we could definitely, if you're a great seamstress and you can measure and make a little pleated bag and plop it inside for the lining, that's awesome. I personally think that that's more work than what I'm about to do here and way less relaxing. So I'm going to show you how to just take these little pieces and we'll do a crazy patch lining where we can just sit back, relax, and stitch. Okay, so this is a really good way to use up little scraps, whether you're doing lining or a quilt block or whatever. It's just this improv crazy patchwork lining. And I think it really makes the bag look pretty when you reach inside. So take one piece of fabric and fold a seam allowance. Right, so here's all my 5 fabrics cut up in all these different pieces, and probably the biggest, I wouldn't go any bigger than 3 inches. 3 inches is fine. Some triangle, you could do rounded shapes, whatever, doesn't really matter. We're going to start, we're not going to line anything above the loops because that just gets, there's no stitching to hide or anything. It's really pretty as it is. So just take this fabric and put it along the edge just under all the loops there. And just with regular sewing thread, I'm using white. Of course, you can use the color of the bag. You can use the same color all throughout. Remember, it's just lining. Put a little knot on it. And then just come up through a few pieces of yarn in the back. Just like you're appliquing. So stay, an eighth to a fourth of an inch, a little bit closer than a fourth of an inch. Directly where the yarn is coming out, pick up back threads and then come out through the fold of the applique. Because that's really kind of what this feels like, is just appliquing a piece on. Every few stitches, stretch the bag out so that you are making sure you're not gathering that bag. Once you get to the end, just leave your needle and thread, and we'll continue on with that. So the next piece, we want to make sure that we can fold under and continue along, but also along the side, let's go ahead and fold that side under too, just to make sure that when we stitch down there, we're covered. And it might be a good idea to just place a pin, as you're stitching, then you don't have to focus on holding it in place. So what we'll do is make sure that this will go straight across, and then this will angle and cover that raw edge. As long as we know we can continue stitching in this direction, keeping that same line, folding this under and pinning it in place, we won't really have to focus on holding it in place. We can just stitch and it won't slip, because obviously we want to make sure that we can cover this raw edge here, right? So just continue stitching, line it up. And what I'm looking at really are just these holes here. And it's more interesting if, we've got this little corner that rises above it a little bit. That's fine. And then just continue on stitching. And get a couple stitches in and you can take that pin out. Because pins can be a pain when your thread gets caught on them, that's for sure. Right, then just continue along. And then when I get to the end here, I'm gonna knot it and cut it and then stitch down this piece, just because I want to make sure that all the pieces are stitched down and not flapping. I'll come back and show you. Okay, so that's stitched all along the top, knotted. And now here, I can just kind of come up here, make sure I'm picking up a couple stitches in the bag. Now when you're stitching a piece on top of a piece, you do want to make sure that you're picking up a little bit of the bag too. Don't let your needle go all the way through, but make sure you're picking up a few pieces of the bag. And that way the lining will conform better and stick to the inside of the bag rather than pucker. It's going to pucker a little bit in this method, and that's okay. We want the lining to be good and snug, and that way we can put anything we want, even teeny tiny little crochet hooks, and they won't fall through. And from this point, it's just kind of a free form stitching. It's really simple. It's pretty. You don't have to think about it too much. Your next piece can come here. You can continue along the top of the bag and then work down. It really doesn't matter as long as you are conforming, forming your fabric along the bag, putting a piece down and stitching. Picking up pieces of the bag, just make sure you're doing that. And then your lining will be done. Okay, and once you're lined and ready to go, this is what you're gonna have. And here is what I have left over from my kit after finishing up the bag. Stay tuned for a bonus project that I'll be sharing in the next week or two by using up some of these scraps. Make sure you're subscribed to the Quilt is Inspired channel so that you can get notifications of new tutorials. I hope you have enjoyed stitching along with me, as I have so much enjoyed connecting with and crafting along with all of you. Thanks so much for joining me on this gypsy journey. And speaking of journeys, I have exciting travels coming up right after the holidays, and I cannot wait to bring you along. Happy Thanksgiving and enjoy your time spent with friends and family. Big hugs to all.